You are now listening to Operator.
Her life was shaped in the capital of Bulgaria, in the shadows of the post-Soviet reality, while being surrounded by enchanting mystical mountains. Today she lives in Rotterdam, where she continues to explore the complexities of her upbringing in her artistic life, integrating elements of Bulgarian traditional witchcraft and folklore. She uses forgotten tools to reflect on our modern lives. Her artistic practice manifests as rituals, experience that invite her audience into a world beyond their imagination. Welcome everyone to a new episode of Gallery Noise. Welcome Magdalena, or Maggie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So great to have you on the show. We're listening to a soundscape, actually the end of a soundscape, nature sounds. And today we are in spring. I mean, it doesn't seem very spring today, but it is March. What is spring for you? This season.
Let's see. Well, life. To put it like very, very like in simple manners. But also childlike wonder. I think at least that is something that wakes up in me when spring starts, and all the little plants that are like waking up and blooming and growing, and it feels like I'm waking up with it as well, and just all this like wonder and curiosity comes in.
Yeah,
definitely a special transition of seasons for me.
And you came to Rotterdam in 2016, I believe. We talked about that before. This was also a new beginning, right?
Definitely.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So after I graduated from high school, I tried to do an art study in Bulgaria, which was very traditional, like fine arts and sculpture. And I just really did not resonate with that. And to begin with, I was raised thinking that I'm going to study abroad. It was never really an idea that I was going to study at home. It was always like, oh yeah, pick a country that you want to go to, because there's no future here in education. So yeah, I moved in here, actually very ignorant of what the art world is.
I see. How so? How did you realize you were ignorant?
Not ignorant, but I guess like having quite a different idea of also like what art is, because as I mentioned, my training was very traditional. So conceptual art was really out of the subject. It was just working on technical skills, like drawing a lot of anatomy, learning like bones and little stuff like that.
Was it a lot of painting as well?
Yeah, a lot of painting, a lot of painting. So when I moved here and I started in Willem de Koning, and I was doing a lot of painting still and trying to figure out, and my teacher was just like, oh, you really have to like try something else, because maybe if you keep on doing painting, your place is not in this art school, because that's very traditional. So that actually was a very motivational kick in the butt to start exploring different mediums, and yeah.
So how was that? You know, you said it was a kick in the butt. How was that like? How did that feel for you? How did it change your relationship to Bulgaria and your hometown?
In a way, in the beginning of like my art education here, because there was a lot of like about conceptualizing and what you want to do, what your interests are, and ever since I was little, magic was always magic, witchcraft, the mystical and so forth were always like a big interest for me. And for some reason, growing up, I always looked outwards, like for example, in Western magic and paganism and all these things, and I never really looked where I was from and what the magic was and so forth. So started doing this research in Bulgarian folklore and discovered all these like deities and rituals and ceremonies and beliefs. And I was like, oh wow, this really, really resonates. And yeah, it felt really right. And for the past, what is it now? 6-7 years, I think Bulgarian folklore has been at the center of my research and my practice, and it will probably continue being.
And is it something your parents also taught you when you grew up, or is it that you were here and you started researching that part of your identity?
Like my parents, my mom is very connected with nature and so forth, and I think that in Bulgarian tradition, being connected to nature is and also like is globally is the connection to natural life. But it was never really like talking about like ceremonies and so forth. They're like modern city people, in that sense. My grandmother was definitely somebody who ritualized more certain things for me, but I didn't really pick it up when I was a kid. Not until I grew up and I was like, oh, this is what she meant, or this is what we were doing, and all these things. But definitely both my parents as well are like witchcraft believers, let's put it like that. Like they do recognize like those energies, powers, or whatever is however they call it.
And what do they comment on your work that you make? Because it is very much connected to witchcraft and Bulgarian folklore.
I think like before 2022, when I did my first performance in Bulgaria for Sofia Art Week, they hadn't seen any performances or anything, just like some sculpture here and there, a visual or anything. Like my mom's always been very supportive, even if she has no fucking clue what's going on. Like, she's just like, yeah, it's amazing. My grandparents on the same, like they're the same. They're just like, oh yeah, we don't really get what you're doing, but like we support you. In that sense. But I was terrified when my parents came to see my first, for the first time, a performance of mine, because it was also about grieving past selves, and there was a installation of obituaries with my name. Which was very conflicting for them, because this is usually a poster that you see when somebody passes away. But I was trying to reinvent it in a way where we can write little poems to our past selves in order to let them go. Yeah. And eventually they got it. Yeah. Like they got it. Like my dad was just like, okay, interesting. Like, keep doing what you're doing. I was like, oh, terrifying.
What a great feeling to have also that support from your parents, I can imagine.
Yeah, for sure. They were very supportive in me studying art as well, which I think, well, a lot of the people that I grew up with didn't have that. Yeah.
And so you grew up in Sofia. And as your introduction said, and that these were also your words, a post-Soviet state. That's something that was also part of your cultural upbringing. Apart from that mystical, natural witchcraft part, there was also that political part.
Yeah, quite a lot. I think that like being born after 89 in post-Soviet countries, we grew up like hearing, oh, you're born during the Great Transition. You're born during the Great Transition. And I was like, okay, but when did that transition end? And there is quite a lot, like either in the city, you still see like a lot of Soviet monuments, and a lot of the beliefs and the ideas within the older generations, they're still quite alive. On the other hand, my grandparents on my mom's side, they're until today like communist as fuck, in the sense of they lived very well during communism. My grandfather was a an officer, and he used to write like study books for the military academy, and he was an engineer and doing like all these little things. And my grandmother had like a landscape architecture study or something like that, but they really had it all, in the sense of like, if you could live well during that time, they did. So my impression from these times is actually quite positive.
I see.
Which is very different from, instance, my dad's side, where they were not really pro-communism. They were poor, struggled quite a lot. So there's also this, I was reading this article from this Albanian artist from, I think, what was it, Maastricht? I was like reflecting on, does the Soviet Union live inside of us as a post-Soviet generation? Yeah. And she made this remark that how a post-Soviet person perceives this period is really based on what how the family experienced it. So there is also like this very in-between stage, which is we're born during a transition, and then we're in between of communism and democracy. Yeah. Because democracy never really arrived in the Balkans, and this Western dream that was promised to everybody that was gonna come in the 90s, it never really came, which leaves this really eerie, kind of like weird feeling of a never-ending transition.
Do you need to position yourself as a child from this generation? Do you feel like you need to somehow choose between one or the other, or?
No, I like this in between.
I see.
I think in like many things in my life, I find myself like in between things. Like I'm not necessarily like, of course, I'm critical of this time, but I'm also critical of like the Western model in a sense, and in that thing, I still find myself in the middle. Yeah. But I don't think there is a need to position myself as, but more of, let's see.
You need to relate in one way or another.
Yeah, and it's inside of me, actually, whether I like it or not. And there is a lot of melancholy and nostalgia that I'm not even sure why I feel sometimes, but I just feel it. Yeah. Like residue.
Is that something you use in your work? Are you exploring this?
Yeah, I think in a way, actually putting this aspect of like being post-Soviet and what does that mean, I'm still kind of trying to conceptualize where I would want to go with that and what my aim would be, because ideally I would like to also gather a community of like post-Soviet creatives and like actually discuss what does that mean, what is the post-Soviet generation.
Как намират няколко пак с табелка пророк. А те бол в изгода любят Тачо и Милея, покойници, докато още те живеят от гняв. Издигат мостовете си прелъстени, изоставени, колко века вече спят. Цопнали в казана надписан мъст и тя колко време да те чака, другарю, все мъдър и позорен и смъчен.
Would you like to swim in sour milk? That's the name of this.
Yes.
Yeah, this soundscape, part of a performance. This name got me so curious.
This is actually something that a friend of mine who passed away, which was also a part of, like, a track of his is within this soundscape. This was something that he used to ask a lot, and I always, it became kind of like an inside thing between the two of us. And I always just was just like, what would it be if I swim in, and it's yogurt, but because in Bulgarian is kisevo mleko, which is literally translated sour milk, I decided to use sour milk instead of yogurt.
I see. Is it because of, why did you do that?
I don't know, it just sounds more like sour milk. In English it sounds nasty.
Yeah, it does. I wouldn't. My answer would be no. What was his answer? Or was he just asking the question?
Just asking the question.
I see.
Yeah.
Was a Bulgarian friend?
Yeah. He passed away here, actually. It was, it was quite heavy, but I think this performance and this soundscape was actually a really good way to have closure, also in a way. Because the poem is a lot about me grieving, and grieving through figures and ideas and deities and monsters of Bulgarian folklore. And specifically through the winter ceremonial cycle, because that's usually the darkest one, when there's like the most monsters and creatures that are out there to get you. So yeah, this performance is quite, this soundscape was quite dark. Usually like the text is quite dark.
Because what are you saying? And we just listened to a part. It is 24 minutes, this soundscape. And for the listeners, the first soundscape that in the introduction was actually the very end. So it ends with nature and noises of new life. But this is the start of the soundscape, right?
Yeah, like at the beginning, I think like the first ones were like little little clay figurines. I'm trying to translate it. Little clay figurines that were raised in damnation. Little clay figurines, and the solar cycle, and then it's actually quite difficult. I've tried to translate this text for the performers that I was doing it for, so they also know like what it's talking about. And it was so difficult. Because it's a lot of metaphors, and it's a lot of old words or like dialect words that are not necessarily used in like modern Bulgarian language that much. I even had like some Bulgarian friends to ask me like, what does this mean? What is this word?
Wow.
But for me also Bulgarian is a really like a spell language.
I see.
In a way that I can write in a way that I could never write in English, unfortunately.
Is it poetic?
Quite. For me, it's quite poetic, and it's quite melodic, and there is a lot of sounds that you can play with, and I always loved that a lot.
And so you told me you had other performance with you when you did it. Can you tell me a little bit about what it would be like to experience this performance in full form?
So this performance, I kind of like, and with the performance that are more towards this winter ceremonial cycle, because there was like 2 other performances that are kind of like fitting and similar in topic, subject to this one. But the first and only time we did it, it was an exhibition in Iserblock Studios. And it was in the garden. Basically, it's me entering a space and 2 demons around me that how to explain it?
An experience is difficult to put in words.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Sure.
Yeah, and so this was also a very personal experience, and you said it was part of your grieving process as well. Your experiences transformed the audience, but also you.
Yeah, I think that like with my performances, the starting point is actually usually something that I need to process myself. I think even the first performance I did in my second year of art school, that was with Bulgarian folklore. It was still, I was going through something, and it's kind of like a transformative ceremony. And in a lot of my work, I do make it quite personal. I think the starting point is always quite personal. And then I search for ways, how can I also resonate that with other people, and how can they also connect to it, because I know a lot of us share the same troubles and pains and so forth, but we don't really talk about it.
Washing off my demons as the sea had washed off this jellyfish on my frisbee. My temporary friends showering in our house next to Marconi blind, watching my grandmother wash off the dirt from our carpets on the river as my sister and I poke the head of a dead snake. The morning of my 23rd birthday, calling upon sun rays which are late, as I always am. I only take if I give, and this energy I must not let slip. I must preserve the butterfly's last breath. I cannot be the reason for its death, but the crave to possess in my 5-year-old heart I could not suppress.
This is another work of yours, also an older work, and you told me it was a follow-up of the previous experience that we had.
Yes, in a way, it kind of like still Well, if Would You Swim in Sour Milk goes over the process of grieving and the discomfort of grieving and all its circumstances. Broshno, which is this work, questions the process of grieving past selves.
Yeah.
So from starting to explore grief, there was just like bit by bit, I kind of like went into this moment of like, but how do we grieve our past selves? And I think
What do you mean by past selves? And what does Broshno mean? I'm
flower.
Flower.
Yeah, not like a flower like a bloom.
Okay.
But flour like for bread.
I see.
Because in the performance I used a lot of flour, and it's usually very ceremonial in Bulgaria. There's a lot of ceremonies that involve like dough making and flour. But by past selves, I mean all these ideas and dreams that we used to have growing up. These visions of who we are. And all these selves that we used to be that we're not actually anymore. Also, I think like within this research, I'm really also tapping into, for example, being queer and letting go of the dreams and ideas that your family had for you.
Yeah.
Having a conventional family form and all these things. And how do you grieve also their ideas of yourself? And I think it's very important that there's actually a conscious process of grieving these selves, because there is a lot of stacking up, I feel, of like energy that is just not being released. And in our previous conversation, when I told you like, sometimes I find myself like feeling like I'm mourning, but I'm not really sure what I'm mourning. And it's these ideas, and just like thinking back at like who I was, staring in the mirror of my childhood bedroom sometimes fucks with me also as well. When I'm staring, it's like, oh God.
Does it still exist in its form?
Yeah, like it was lastly, I think, redecorated when I was like 14. So yeah, still
really?
Like quite... it's like kind of a mind fuck.
And being queer is a big part of this grieving as well, or is an example of how you grieve?
I think it's a branch.
Yeah.
I think it's just a branch of the selves and the things that I'm grieving. For example, also for Bulgaria's dismissal of neurodivergency, or like growing up in a homophobic reality, and like all these things, basically like making me question the selves that could have been.
Yeah.
But also just there's a lot of gratitude that they're gone, so I can be the way that I am today. And of course, like who I am today will also pass.
Yeah.
And I think this metaphor of death for me is very important also in the way that I go, because it feels like there's many lives within one, and that takes off the pressure.
Was there a lot of pressure?
There's always a lot of pressure.
Yeah, fair. So this is the performance you did in Bulgaria, and your parents were there to see it.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where you came out to your parents, or was there a very specific moment, or was it a transition?
I came out to my mom. Like the first time I saw her after like I was already in a relationship with somebody else, and the first time I went home, I was just like, yo, I have to tell you, I can, because I'm very close with my mom, so this wasn't something that I felt that I could hide.
Yeah.
Anymore. With my dad, I don't think necessarily, because we're quite distant, so I don't trust him enough for him to understand. But in terms of like my mom and my sister, always quite supported. But of course, I had to go through this feeling of like seeing my mom grieve.
Yeah.
This idea that she had for me, or these dreams and so forth, and that can be quite heavy sometimes. Well, I guess like always.
Is it also a way you thought about yourself? Like, of course, your mom had ideas for you. Maybe you grew up like, and she thought she will start a nuclear family and do whatever, you know. Is that something you thought about yourself, or was that never?
Never.
No?
No, I'm a child of divorced parents. I never really saw like marriage, I think, as I always was just like, oh, that's just like a document, or like so forth, and just I could never really figure out. I had all these friends that's like, yeah, I'm gonna get married, have 2 children, and like so forth. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think I let go of that idea. I was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna have like that. And it's like, well, I don't know, because also like my parents, they kind of like went on having different also like forms of lifestyle. Like my dad didn't also remarry, but it's just like a partnership, and also that made me question like the different forms of how you can be. And
is that very common in the Bulgarian setting? Is that something, or maybe
it's very common that like you, if you could even make a family within the family home, and that makes a family within the family home, and you all stay together, and it's like a huge house, like that's ideal.
I see.
But yeah, there's definitely like a lot of. I still sometimes, it breaks my heart when my grandma calls me and she's just like, yeah, I just want you to have like a proper man next to you, and then I can die in peace. And I was like, oh, if you only knew that I had a proper person, but she's just not a man.
Yeah.
And these things, I think that like a lot of us like struggle in general. And I think with this performance, I'm kind of like giving power to being able to let go and separate yourself from these things. At least that's what it was for me. So the obituaries that I made, which obituary in Bulgaria is in the form of a poster.
Yeah.
So it was the way of people to announce death in public space.
And they would be hung in the city, or like people would know, oh, this person is not with us anymore. Or,
exactly.
Yeah,
like,
see.
And that was something that came from the West.
Yeah.
But in the West was more in newspapers and stuff like that. But like the Bulgarian people, I guess at the time, they were just, that was the easier way to announce death in public space. It did go kind of overboard, which is also like why I feel quite inspired by them visually, because people just put them every 3 months, new ones on top, and then you have this like layers and layers and layers under, like deteriorating under the weather of obituaries, which kind of like, and to me it resembles this wallpaper of collective grief. Yeah. In the sense of like, because they merge even at the end, like the paper under the rain and so forth, and they're these like huge pieces. And I think when I was writing them, I was just like, okay, now I'm letting go of Maggie, who was like 7. Now I'm letting go of Maggie, who was 12. And she believed in this and this and that was unhealthy. But yeah, it was, the gallery owner asked me like, aren't you terrified? Like to look at all these obituaries with your name? And I'm just like, no, it feels so relieving to actually see them externalized in that way.
That's a very strong image.
Yeah.
Egy moj djado teško vreme, ralo to se dva plači. Egy moj djado teško vreme, ralo to se dva plači. Egy moj djado teško vreme, egy moj djado teško vreme, egy moj djado. Zakapaka je tri kapki, neni ne sa kapki tremi. Zakapaka je tri kapki, neni ne sa kapki tremi.
But yeah, like these little things they really pick up from.
So yeah, we were just talking about a custom that your mom does, and can you please tell us about it, because I think it was very interesting.
So not touching the bed sheets of if you're gonna fly or travel until you arrive. Basically, the sheets are not washed or touched from the bed, removed or anything.
Yeah.
Ideally, you just close the door at best until the person arrives. Yeah, I just saw her like do it, but I never knew that she did it before for like me and my sister and all these things when we would travel. But I also thought it was just quite random. But also, as we were speaking of like these things that are kind of in the older generations when they have become also like almost automated,
Yeah.
as like ideas of like what you should do when something happens and so forth. And then the generation of our parents, they picked up a few things, but as they're like more city modern people,
Yeah.
like it's kind of like in between.
And it's interesting because you said there is no explanation for it. Your mom doesn't even know why she does it, but it is somehow intuitive. Did you only, clean the bed again of someone when they landed in a new land?
Yeah.
And that's, I find that very interesting. And I thank you for sharing that also with all of you. And so in the meantime, when we were talking, we all listened to a beautiful 7-minute choir, Bulgarian female choir. Can you tell me, what does it do to you?
It makes me cry. Like, I think the very first time I heard this song, because I actually discovered it last year, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? Because it's not like the music behind it is not traditional Bulgarian song. It's just the choir, and I think it's in collaboration with a Western composer. I'm not really sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like just this makes me feel like there is something that is like big coming, and I suddenly get full. I don't know. Also because the lyrics kind of like talk about this old grandpa who cannot work anymore, and his son is asking him like, why are you crying? Why are you crying? But also like, you're so old. I used to remember when my grandma was singing and you were working the land. Oh, a great storm is coming, and all these things, and just makes me think of, my grandpa on the land, and all these kind of like that dying out demographic in the mountains that is in the Balkans.
Because relatively, there are quite a lot of old people in the Balkans.
Yes.
And young people tend to, like you said, like you grew up with, hey, this is not a place where there's a future for you, so go elsewhere. And a lot of young people grow up like this.
A lot. Like a lot of us like grew up knowing that we're not gonna like live in Bulgaria. And actually I watched a little documentary a few weeks back that was, the Balkans actually have like a proper decline in population. Because so many young people are like, just from Bulgaria, 10,000 young people leave every year. And we are the same amount outside of Bulgaria that we are inside the country. And you have like all these like abandoned villages throughout the mountains that used to have like thousands of people in them, and now they just have like 5. And it's quite sad. Yeah. It makes me quite sad, and I think that like also with these people dying out, there's a lot of rituals, customs, crafts that are dying out, and tools that I think can be still very useful today.
Yeah. Because you are working, your art does integrate these tools. Yeah, there's something you think about, and I was just wondering how you're working on something new. Maybe you can tell a little bit about how you continue that process and how you want to keep these customs alive.
For example, one of the projects that I'm writing right now is called kvass, which is yeast, and it kind of like takes on also like flour. Again, and as a skeleton, it uses this old ritual, which is called naming, naricane. It can be done with water or flour, bread dough. And basically you set your intentions, and you start handling the dough while you introduce yourself and say what you want from life. And basically you plant your intentions into the dough, and it's usually done in a group environment where multiple people do it. You can chant or you can just say it. Mostly it's like spoken word, but you can also sing. So in a way, in this
sounds fun as well.
Yeah. Also just playing with the dough and feeling it. It's actually quite meditative process. Yeah. I've been trying to make dough and different yeasts and starters and stuff like that, and it's quite difficult, but it's a very nice material to work with. So in this performance, I would like to kind of invite different Balkan artists from various artistic backgrounds, where we all go into a circle and we chant in our own languages our intentions. And later on, just as a material kind of research and exploration, I'm just curious how the dough and the yeast would grow in contact with the body heat. So I'm just curious to explore movement of the body with huge chunks of dough within space, and how can that play along?
It's very physical.
Yeah.
Like I notice a lot of the experiences you make are something that you need to do, you need to enact somehow.
Yeah, because I see it as opening a little new dimension. And I think that like with rituals and customs, and like all these ceremonies, there are like usually the steps that you need to do, to get to there. And in that way, also with my neurodivergent brain, it creates structure also to the experience. And of course, it's good to just let yourself go. But on the other hand, there's steps in ceremonies for a reason.
You need to relate to it somehow. There's some sort of boundary so you can explore.
Yeah, in a way.
Talking about fun and different ways of integrating, you also sent this song, which I absolutely love. Let's have a listen.
Yay!
Going to try and relive this next tune for you now. It's one of the most traditional tunes. It starts off with a little, then it goes into this, then we play the beautiful, and finishes up with the modern. So if you close your eyes and sit back, I'm sure you have a good imagination.
What a party. Oh, and talking about party, I have a very nice announcement. Just 5 minutes before the show, I got a call from my brother, and his girlfriend gave birth to 2 little babies, Mare and Luna. So I just wanted to say that.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I'm very excited, and I'm very, very happy that everything went well. And new life in spring is very symbolic.
It's beautiful.
I love it.
Very beautiful.
And then this song, wow. So the first time you heard this song, where was it?
Oh, this track I heard. I don't even remember where. It was probably like me researching music, but like this genre, it was just an illegal rave somewhere in the mountains, and like I don't know. I think I was 17 or something. Yeah, and it just it always like clicked so much with me, but I never really saw any representation. Even the Balkan Bulgarian DJs, producers that I see like outside or even in the country, they don't use our music that much for some reason. I guess it's like more also trying to comply with like the Western idea of like what music is, like what electronic music should be and so forth. But I've been spending a lot of time to try to archive a lot of these tracks and just create like a big collection. And it's been giving me a lot of joy. It's a very happy music. Gives me a lot of energy.
Is there also a plan for you to, throw a party one time with just all of these tracks that you collected?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I'm learning how to DJ right now.
That would be wonderful. but our time is one already, and I just want to ask you, where can we follow you? Where can we find you? And how can we stay up to date with your next work?
So for now is unfortunately just Instagram, because I'm working on my website, so I took it down. But Instagram is a really good one. Should I say it?
Yes, please say your Instagram.
Magdalena HV Petrova, or you can also check out one of my collectives, Samudiva, or Wet Dreams, and soon I'll put my online portfolio back online once I've edited it.
I am very excited. And let's close this conversation with one more song, which is incredible. And I want to thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Actually, we could fill another hour or 3.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really like a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.